Then they reinvented the Zimbabwe dollar in 2019. And what they did back then was you had an US dollar account in a Zimbabwean bank. And from one day to the other, they told you, this is now not a US dollar anymore, this is Zimbabwe dollar. But don't fret, the value will stay the same. And everyone knew, no, you basically just stole all my money.
Hello, I am Cody Ellingham, and this is the Transformation of Value, a place for thinkers and builders where we ask questions about freedom, Bitcoin, and creativity. My guest today is Anita Posch, a strategic Bitcoin advisor, educator, author, and founder of Bitcoin for Fairness. Since 2017, she has been speaking on the biggest and the smallest stages to bring Bitcoin knowledge to thousands of people. Anita has travelled extensively, including to places such as Zambia, South Africa, Ghana, Indonesia, El Salvador, and Zimbabwe, where she is currently based, learning firsthand about how local economies develop and how Bitcoin is being used. Anita, welcome to the show.
Hello, Cody. It's great being here. Thanks for the invitation.
I want to start with a bit of a contrast because I know you were travelling through New Zealand last year and now you're in Harare, Zimbabwe. What strikes you as the difference and, importantly, the similarities between these two countries?
It's funny how that you ask that, because when I was in New Zealand, I was very often reminded of Zimbabwe. They both have a British history and architecture in that sense. And also the landscape sometimes, I don't know. Of course, it's totally different. But from the way of life, what I enjoyed in New Zealand is also people are very much laid back. They are not like carrying around their status a lot, like I know it from Europe and from the US and from other parts of the world. And Zimbabwe is very similar. One reason why people can't carry their status around is that a lot of them don't have any. But in general, people are more chilled here, nobody looks what you are wearing, for instance, Of course, you dress up a little bit when you go somewhere, but in the end, it doesn't really matter. And you don't feel that pressure that you have in other regions of the world. So it was funny because I sometimes in New Zealand said, I just feel like in Zimbabwe here.
Oh, interesting. So you had been to Zimbabwe before, so this isn't your first time being there?
Yes, it's my, I assume, fifth time. I'm not quite sure, but yes, I think the fifth time. I came the first time in 2020, just before the pandemic. So I made it out of the country before the airports closed and went back to Austria.
Yeah, that's fascinating because the reason I wanted to ask is growing up, I had a lot of friends come from South Africa, Zimbabwe, basically got out, especially after 2008 or around about that period. And certainly what you said strikes me when you do look on Google Maps and you just do Street View and you compare South Africa, Zimbabwe, if you just look at the way the cities look, they have that certain look that it reminds me of New Zealand, but I guess and that's the similarities, but the differences we must look at are the economy. And right now you're experiencing a power cut as we speak. So we're on battery power in Zimbabwe. You're using a Starlink, I assume. Load shedding is a daily occurrence, it seems. There's maybe a lot of economic turmoil. So I guess in that sense, how have these two countries, or how is, I guess, broadly Africa and say somewhere like New Zealand sort of changed or differed over the last few decades?
Oh my, so how has it changed? I can't say over the last decades because I'm only here on the African continent since 2020. Okay. But of course, taking Zimbabwe as an example, Zimbabwe is extreme, but also in South Africa. So after a short period after the independence of these countries, where they still were prosperous, and South Africa has a totally different story in a way than Zimbabwe. But one fact I, for instance, didn't know before I came here, there was also apartheid in Zimbabwe, like full-blown apartheid. I never heard about that in school or anywhere else. So it's interesting from that perspective. So they had these challenges of how power was taken over by people from here, and the British had basically to go home. There were different ways how they did that. But the sad thing in many African countries that you can see is that people, how shall I say, they developed sadly a very corrupt power structure here. In many of these countries, we see long-term authoritarian presidents who try to throw over the constitution. I mean, we don't only see that in Africa at the moment, also in other places of this world. And what you can especially see here in Zimbabwe is how the monetary system that we have at the moment, the fiat system, is definitely a driver of disparities. I mean, you have very rich people here, but also very, very poor people. And the system of that central banks and consumer banks are giving out credit and basically lending money away, and people have to pay back their loans. And that's the way how we create money. And that central banks here, they really just print the money. This is not, you know, in other areas of the world, we say, okay, we have 2% inflation or maybe 3 or 4, but we have a control system with the central bank and things like that. But here it's really blatant printing of money. So it really is an example of how you can use this system to squeeze everything out of people. So infrastructure, as you said, it's totally down. I mean, just as an example, we have a municipal water system, but it's not working since 10 or 15 years here. But we still need to pay for the fact that we are connected to the system, which is ridiculous because we don't get any water from there. Electricity, as you said, the government tells people, oh, yeah, we have problems, sorry, we are not producing enough electricity for the demand, but just get yourself a solar system. I mean, this is for people like us something, okay, we need to put a little bit of money aside and buy a solar system. But most of the population in these countries, in these areas, can't afford that. So all these corruption and problems produce a world where you are even more disempowered because now you can't be a part of the global digital economy, for instance, you know. So it's a lot of difficulties that you face here. And this also, interestingly enough, plays into the adoption of cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, all new technologies.
Yeah. I do want to dive into that, but I guess lingering on the politics and money point for a moment, this is really interesting. As I said, friends from Zimbabwe and New Zealand, everyone's familiar with the Zimbabwe dollar, like the $1 trillion notes and that sort of thing. I've got one actually, the $500 billion, not that much, back at home in New Zealand. And obviously 2008, Robert Mugabe, this period of hyperinflation is quite well known. But again, I want to connect that back to the New Zealand story because New Zealand is an agricultural country, export orientated. Zimbabwe, the breadbasket of Africa, and now the basket case potentially. And so seeing that connection between what was once a very prosperous nation and what it has become, and the connections also to what you said about British culture, because Ian Smith, one of the former prime ministers during before Robert Mugabe, said Zimbabwe was more British than Britain. And the same thing could be said about somewhere like New Zealand, where we've held on to a lot of these old ideas, yet somehow New Zealand has made it through, whereas Zimbabwe hasn't. And I am curious sort of that connection between politics and money, and then potentially even education, because unlike New Zealand, Zimbabwe had a very radical and quick change of power, and that sort of led to maybe people coming in who didn't understand how to run a country. And so is this something that plays into this, is lack of governance and education?
I don't think it's lack of education, because today's finance minister here, he went to university in England. I think they know what they're doing. But I also believe that the sudden change of power in 1980, there was, as far as I know, no period of like learning, okay, you take over now. This is how governance is well done at the moment, and maybe do it the same way. And there's also, sadly, I think the takeover, or the way how it was given, the people weren't chosen the right way. It were the strongest and the most ruthless people who got into power then. And that's the problem, because what they did then is they started. There's a saying. People say here, the people in power, they want to eat. It's called who's next to eat, basically. So that means who is in power and who is going to get rich, because they're extracting all the value from the people and the country. And that's how it goes. And so it's a very corrupted mindset. I don't know. These people have no shame in that sense. And there's no control, because they took over all the power. Just this week, last week, there were demonstrations. But it seems there is no opposition at the moment. Yeah, they are basically the violence of the current regime. It seems it's even higher than the one under Mugabe. And that's the problem, because people are scared. You don't go out on the streets when you know you will be shot, because that's what happened in 2017 or 19, I think. I can't remember exactly. So that's the main problem. And the whole, it's a very well-maintained machinery here of power and corruption. Like in 2017, Mnangagwa was supported by the military, and he took over basically from Mugabe. That was a coup. And now how was that? I recently read that from 2017 up until today, because the military basically was led by the current vice president. And the current vice president called out Mnangagwa and his people about the corruption, and that it's not okay what they're doing. And so the military was in recent years basically the resistance in a little bit against Mnangagwa, but they killed a lot of the military officers. So there are not many left. So at the moment, it seems that the power is back in Mnangagwa's hands, or not really in his hands, but in the system's hands, because there are rumors that he has dementia, But then also Robert Mugabe was a puppet in a sense, because he also didn't have a clear mind anymore. You heard that when he was speaking. So it's a very complex system, and people are scared, and the corruption goes from top down to anyone. I heard from people who were opposition members, and then they see they don't get any money from that, they can't earn a lot, and then they go to the SANU-PF because there they get funds, So it's really sitting very deeply here in the system is corruption. And power corrupts, and too much power definitely corrupts. And that's why it's important that in other countries that there's a system of governance and control, that corruption can't happen, but it's difficult. We know that,
Yeah. Well, I must say, I perhaps reveal my naivety from a Kiwi perspective when I mention, is it simply a case of education? Because I guess the strata of the New Zealand democratic system, governance, all of this has been inherited from what would be considered the high point of enlightenment and, the British Empire, and all of this separation of powers and all of these things that have come through time. And so there's just an entire social system built upon that, and that when you're in a place where that doesn't exist, it becomes what you describe: corruption, warlordism, just the will to power. And it's, I guess, an interesting thing because, I don't expect us to answer the question of Africa today, but in this conversation, but, it seems like there's some connection here with Bitcoin, which I hope we can talk about, in the way that it not only removes the ability to coerce, but it simply makes it impossible. The decentralized nature of it, its governance model is very interesting. And I do wonder whether something like that can have more impact than maybe something like the classic aid or education missions that come into developing countries and seem to spend a lot of money but don't always have the impact that maybe people would expect. So how would you maybe describe that connection between something like Bitcoin as this decentralized idea that is just so powerful in that ability to remove coercion and to remove that will to power, versus maybe traditional aid, education, mission, trade mission attempts to kind of bring that stuff to these countries?
Yeah, it's also a difficult topic. I mean, because in principle, of course, I see everything that you say, like Bitcoin is uncensorable. It's money sent from person to person. No one can interfere. No one can print more of it. And we all know all of that. And so it's basically, it sounds perfect. It's the perfect tool for this place. Really, it's absolutely the perfect tool. But then you come here and you see the realities on the ground, like over the years, I got a little bit frustrated here, to be honest, because I feel like, hey, people, this tool is so unique. It's basically made for you. Why don't you use it? But there are so many reasons, and it starts with most of the people here are used to have from the top level down, If the government tells you you're allowed to do something, you do it. If they don't say it, you think it's illegal and you might not use it. Then there have been a variety of scams here, It's not only the MLM schemes, it's also that crypto and Bitcoin is only known from these scams and from betting, online gaming. People use cryptocurrency to do online gaming because that's the way how they feel they can add some more money to their lives because they can't earn anything here. So there are a lot of challenges here for people to use Bitcoin. Like, say, the decrease of the volatility of Bitcoin is a problem. So first, only know it from a scam and you think it's illegal and you think you need to wait for your government to allow you to use it. What the government never will do, quite the opposite. They made it quite clear that they don't like Bitcoin, they like blockchain. But of course they don't like Bitcoin. They don't like it when their people use it because then they know they have no possibility to steal from them anymore. But on the other hand, they want to use it themselves. I'm pretty sure that these people here know about Bitcoin and that they use it. So with the problem of volatility, of course, if you have people who earn $300 a month, and this is something doctors earn here, that's not like a worker somewhere. It's doctors and very well-educated people who have maybe $300, $400 a month. And then you want to use Bitcoin to maybe save something, if you even can save something. And then the value goes down over a year. Then you say, I can't afford to lose any of that. And that's why in the last couple of years, like 3 years ago, I would say the 20% of people here were asking for, I would like to exchange to Bitcoin, I want to have Bitcoin, and 80% were using USDT. Today it's more like 95% are using USDT and 5% are using Bitcoin as a store of value. And so it's always, when you learn about Bitcoin and when you hear about its possibilities and opportunities and you think, wow, that's the solution. That's the solution to the problem. But then when you are on the ground and you see how life really goes on here, and how few time people have to learn something, and we're still in the adoption phase of this technology and in the development phase of this technology, where you really need to explain how this works. Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, the Lightning Network is a great thing. In addition to Bitcoin, to spend micro amounts, to have low fees and still retain self-custody. But come here, explain someone why you need a wallet that then has Bitcoin, Lightning, and maybe also Liquid, because that might be easier to do self-custody with than with Phoenix, or you just let them use Wallet of Satoshi. So when you are principled and want to explain people really what they are using here, so that in the future they also make informed decisions, then it's still too complicated. It's still much too complicated, And so there are so many things, that we need time.
Yeah. Well, if I'm hearing you correctly, I mean, maybe the lens that we can use here to look at this is that lens that you were quite straight up with, which is that it is corruption from the highest level. And when there is a gravy train for people in power to keep people out of being emancipated, out of being wealthy, then they're going to just ride it. And I think that's a really interesting way to frame it, because I do think maybe there's some narratives out there that, it's kind of going to be good for Africa, right? Which is kind of a very generic, simplistic statement. When actually, as you say, the reality in a place like that, or for myself, traveling to places like Tonga, and the Pacific Islands, which are closer to to the New Zealand experience, that it's pretty clear, like, these people aren't going to be running nodes. They don't they don't have a computer at home. They don't have you haven't even got electricity right as we speak right now. So there's kind of a bit of a gap there, and I do wonder, again, I don't expect us to answer the great question of Africa, but in terms of the idea of, like, well, how do these systems of thought where someone can actually want to become successful and to have a society that functions, basically, like, what is the mechanism that makes that happen? Why is it that New Zealand and Australia are functional societies as colonies, yet Zimbabwe and South Africa are not? Like, what is the big difference there?
I don't know. People. I can't really tell you that the system of corruption is so ingrained in everyone. You can't get anything almost without paying someone extra. And people are driving here without licenses. They have licenses, but they paid for it. You can buy your way into getting citizenship here. You can buy everything. It's the mindset, and I don't know how you can reset that.
Yeah, well, especially how can you fix that without violence is also the other one, right? Because revolution after revolution, coup after coup, there's a lot of human suffering involved. What does it look like for something to be aspirational and hopeful? And I do wonder, Anita, whether the role of communism in the 1970s and 1980s in Africa also has something to do with this, because New Zealand, Australia, Canada, these kinds of places, which were much closer to the Anglosphere, closer to the Western world, there were barriers to communism entering. Whereas I feel like some of that revolutionary rhetoric, there's kind of centralization of power that had happened from the Soviet influence. I wonder, in your experience, has that had a lasting impact, or?
Oh, from that perspective, yes, of course, it has an impact. Up until today, many of the African countries and also Zimbabwe are allies of Russia. That might be true, yes, but I don't want to put it just to that, okay, these were communist countries or there were communist influences and in other colonies not. I don't know if this is the only reason, Yep.
Yeah, well, so look, I mean, because I don't want to bag on Zimbabwe too much. I do wonder whether we can zoom in a little bit, and I want to focus on maybe some of the successes you've had, in particular at a local level. You know, have you seen at a small scale even people who are interested, circular economies forming these kinds of things? Tell me about that.
Yes, of course. I mean, it's I just wanted to tell a little bit about the story how when you sit in your armchair at home, you might feel Bitcoin is the greatest solution, and why is not everyone using it immediately, or why are people not getting it, because a lot of people are then hating on these people who don't understand it. I just wanted to speak a little bit to that point, that there are reasons why people don't get it yet. Of course, we are having successes, and it's really great to see how these small communities are growing. We started in 2020 here in Zimbabwe with talks and workshops. We are having a couple of initiatives that sprang out of that work, like there's Bitcoin Reach in Zimbabwe, a WhatsApp group. Now we also, we're going to Bulawayo this week, which is the second biggest city in Zimbabwe. We're going to meet there a Bitcoin miner, which I helped a couple of years ago to get some ASICs miners donated to him. Because he told me he wants to start mining, he has excess solar power, and he would like to try that. And we're going there to document what has happened. We are also going to set up a few BitAxes with him, these small home mining devices. And he went to school there, and now he has this school project where they changed the swimming pool of the school into a fish pond, and to have food for the children, and also to be able to sell those fish. And in winter, it's getting colder here, and he wants to set up the miners that way that the heat of the miners is basically warming the water. So, and we're also going to meet a young man who has been following my work since a couple of years, and he now started his own initiative in Bulawayo. They recently had a dresser academy. So it's tiny little seeds that are starting to grow. A lot of work we also have been doing in Zambia, which is the neighbor state here from Zimbabwe, mainly in Lusaka. I went there the first time in 2022. I've been there 4 times now. And we built or helped set up a community of Bitcoiners. And, the first thing you need to bring to people is the fact that I'm doing Bitcoin-only education. And I try to tell them why, what my reasons for that are, and that I feel that many other crypto projects are just distractions, and a lot of them are scams. So you can really see with them, like from the first event we did together in 2022, which was a conference at the University of Zambia, there were other guys who were speaking too, mostly about blockchain and crypto, and one was even from X Infinity. And I was sitting there and like, oh my God. So I'm doing a Bitcoin introduction, and there is this guy from this scam. I mean, the full-blown size of the scam, people didn't know back then, but I had my gut feeling about it, So one of these guys, today now, he's a Bitcoin only guy, and he said, well, now I understand the differences. And he's even saying to other people who want to work with them and contribute, he says, yes, but you're doing these Stellar workshops, you're conducting these workshops for Stellar, because, these companies like Stellar, they have the money, they have the marketing money to pay the people here. And that is the important thing. People here need to be paid for what they are doing. They don't have spare time like we to waste. So they went basically from, I'm a blockchain guy and crypto, to, okay, now I understand Bitcoin only. And we did, 2 weeks ago, we did 5 events there. We did the first developer meetup. So to let people know or share the knowledge that people can and shall take part in the development on Bitcoin. To build their own solutions, because I feel it's so important that people in their countries themselves build their own solutions, because how should the Americans or Europeans or wherever the developers sit know about the problems here, and the possible solutions to it. Another thing, we've been to Bitcoin Ekasi the first time in 2022 in South Africa. It just started in late 2021, and it's a circular community that was initiated by Herman. He has a surf school in Mossel Bay, and they already had a program for the last 10 years running where they basically taught children or helped them. They gave them food, they showed them how to learn to surf. And these are kids from a township. So they are basically not having a lot of opportunities there. And then he learned about Bitcoin and about Bitcoin Beach, the project there, and he decided he wants to start a circular economy or try to start it in the township. And so he started to pay his surf teachers in Bitcoin. And they then went home basically in their area in the township and started to onboard merchants there. And today, 3 years in, they have a small Bitcoin center, an education center. I met Bongani recently. Bongani is one of the children who 3 years ago was still trying to learn to surf, and he also learned about Bitcoin. And I have a video on, like a small interview with him on YouTube, and it's really, really warming the hearts of everyone, because this guy is now 16, he's getting 17 soon, and he set up the Bitcoin and Lightning nodes in the Bitcoin Ekasi Center that are being used for their collaborative custody, as far as I know. And he's fully into it, He's like, I wanted to know, why did Satoshi build it like that? And how is it working? And all of that. And now I want to become a developer and earn a lot, and then buy, of course, a house and a car.
Yeah.
So there are many people who are really uplifted by it. Over the years, but it's hard because in between, from 2022 to 2025, we had a bear market, For a couple of months, the value only deteriorated. So setting up such a circular economy is also a real tough task. You have to be very committed, and it takes a lot of also financial means to build that. And speaking of that, last thing I want to mention from Zambia, sorry. In Vic Falls, because Vic Falls is at the border to Zimbabwe, that's basically, for me, it's always Zimbabwe and Zambia. Vic Falls, Victoria Falls is a like Niagara Falls, a big waterfall, a tourist attraction. A lot of people from abroad, tourists, are coming to Vic Falls. So Adam, a guy from the US, started Bitcoin Vic Falls there. And he was asking us, hey, you are doing a lot of work in Zambia. I'm looking for a teacher. And so we were talking with him and helping him to find Humphrey from Lusaka, from our community, who now moved to Vic Falls and is doing the whole teaching there. So they are also trying to set up a small circular economy there by onboarding the shops. So the hope, of course, is that enough shops are accepting Bitcoin so that also Bitcoiners can come in, see Vic Falls, visit Zambia and Zimbabwe, and also spend their money there. So, but as I said, things are very small at the beginning, but I still believe that if people get it, then they will start using Bitcoin over other cryptocurrencies.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that detailed insight into what's going on in that part of the world. I guess I get this feeling, Anita. I mean, Bitcoiners, are very interested in helping others via education, sharing what they know, and it's kind of baked into the open source ethos. But I do wonder sometimes the larger sociological, geopolitical situation we're in, where somewhere like Zimbabwe really is just in between so many hegemonic forces that we can try our best and be very earnest, and I think a lot of Bitcoiners have very good intentions and outlook for this kind of stuff, but in the face of raw power from a corrupt government, for example, which has the monopoly on violence, there's actually not that much we can do except hodl. And so we run into these challenges where I sometimes wonder, certain parts of the world, are they just going to stay in this stagnant way of being for the foreseeable future? And is it a case that even somewhere like New Zealand, where we've kind of inherited a good system but it is starting to decay, were we just lucky? I wonder, is there a bigger piece here that we're missing out on that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I do. Yeah, I mean, the bigger piece, I don't know what it is, but what I also see is, yes, it's sad that in a way democratic values and things are like the whole system is deteriorating, but I believe the problem is the money system that we have. That's the problem. And capitalism in a way is a problem. I don't know how we can make it so it works better, but the current system makes the rich richer and the poor poorer, and this will always be used by people for a monopoly of power. Yeah, I mean, just look into the US. What are the billionaires doing? What do they want? Yeah, I mean, they want to change the system. I see that. But I don't think they want to change it for the better good of everyone. They want to change it for their better good. They are no different than a Mnangagwa. Maybe they don't kill people, but you also don't know that, Well, in a way, they do. Yeah. Not by. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Come again.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so pulling on that thread, and again, this is a bigger question, but I do wonder, I mean, you talk about 1980 in Zimbabwe, and I reflect on the New Zealand story at that time, which was, of course, the neoliberal reforms. And so I think an outright criticism of capitalism, maybe some people's eyebrows may raise at that, but certainly this late stage fiat project, I think, and maybe really represented by the neoliberal reforms that kind of benefited New Zealand, I guess, in a sense. But there was a lot of pain at that time. But certainly what happened with Zimbabwe at that time was quite negative. And so I guess there's feels like there's just a larger geopolitical move, and Bitcoin is an opt-out of that entire thing. But that's hard because most people aren't ready to kind of opt out of the system that they're in. That's a pretty big ask. And so the actual work is on reforming the money at writ large, which I imagine in the Zimbabwe, what's it like at the moment? I mean, are you guys experiencing inflation at the moment? What's that like on a day-to-day basis?
That's a permanent status. So you mentioned the Zimbabwe dollar before, like in the times of the hyperinflation 2008, 2009, which no coincidence is also the same time of the big financial crisis worldwide. There was the Zimbabwe dollar. In between, there was no Zimbabwe dollar. It was the US dollar only. Then they reinvented the Zimbabwe dollar in 2019. And what they did back then was you had an US dollar account in a Zimbabwean bank. And from one day to the other, they told you, this is now not a US dollar anymore. This is Zimbabwe dollar. But don't fret, the value will stay the same. And everyone knew, no, you basically just stole all my money. I know people that happened to them not only once, but already twice in their lives. And so and then the Zimbabwe dollar from 2019 to 2024 inflated from, I don't know, what was the last thing, 1 to 800 or 900 or something. And then what they did, they invented a new currency. Now it's called the ZiG, the Zimbabwean gold. And they say it's backed by gold. But everyone here knows it's definitely not backed by gold. I mean, this country has enough gold and natural resources, But there is also a documentary called The Gold Mafia on YouTube, which is very interesting. And it basically shows how directly the people in the government and their friends are profiteering by stealing basically gold and washing US dollars. And so what was the question? Sorry.
Well,
I got a little bit...
No, it's okay. We were just exploring though this larger.
You were asking me about inflation. Yeah, exactly.
Inflation.
Yeah. So so the same is happening again. So they invented that SIG and it's inflating already. So last April, I think April, May it was, that they forced the people to use the Zimbabwe gold. And today the rate, let's say 3 weeks ago, when I was asking in the shops what's the rate, they were telling me it's 1 to 31. And this week it was 1 to 41. So the game is on all the time. This won't stop. That's their method of stealing value from the people.
Yeah. No, thank you for that insight.
Sorry, because you were speaking about the neoliberal agenda and the, let's say, the good dictators. I'm President Bukele. I'm a happy dictator. Ha ha ha. Yeah. What they're doing here is the prime example of where these countries are going to be in a couple of years if this doesn't change. That's my opinion. This shows you a way of, I don't have the right word for it. It's a military, violent-led capitalism by the powerful, something like that. And it's a system. And to break that system, you really, as you said, you need some sort of violence. And how I feel that many of these countries might end up a little bit like Zimbabwe, because, I think the billionaires are not going to work in the interest of everyone, mostly in their interest.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting. And again, this is a much bigger topic, but I think there is something going on at a structural level. And I think we can be nuanced enough to unpick the rhetoric of what would be communist ideology, neoliberal ideology. I think we can look at all of these quite clearly from the third place, which is Bitcoin. And this is one of the things that Bitcoin's actually really good for, just from a educational perspective, the epistemology of money. It's like we can be in Bitcoin and kind of be outside of that world and look in on it. But one thing I did want to just pull on was you talked about Tether USDT being used quite a lot. And I do wonder if there's something to that in terms of the US dollarization, which had happened from 2019, right, or until 2019 in Zimbabwe. So talk to me about the US dollar in the part of the world that you're in.
Absolutely, it has to do with that. And it's, the country is officially a multi-currency country, so people are still using the US dollar. The US dollar, the country is basically dollarized. No one wants to use the Zimbabwe gold because everyone knows it loses its value and everyone wants to get access and hold US dollars. So it's a US dollar economy. And that's why also people have learned over the years that despite the fact that the US dollar is also losing value over time due to inflation, for them it's totally stable. It's their security system. And in that sense, of course, there is also this, I know already what the US dollar is. Okay, now I have a digital US dollar. That's my savings instrument now, or at least the instrument where I don't lose value. So of course, that's what people know here, and that's why they use it. And what they want from cryptocurrency is in fact something that is stable, that they can use fast, cheap. I also heard from someone who is a money trader, basically a peer-to-peer trader. He told me he's like a couple of years ago when I met him the first time, he was telling me he's a Bitcoiner. Last week he told me he's sorry to say, but he is a Tether guy now because there are predictable fees on Tether. And he doesn't have that with Bitcoin, either on-chain or Lightning, because I showed him the Phoenix, the self-custodial Lightning wallet once, and he opened the channel, and it was at the time when the fees were very high, and so he had to open a channel on the chain, which meant that from his $70 he put in, 30 were used for fees. He's never going to use that again. And so people need predictable fees, they need predictable value. That's sadly a fact, and only those who really understand the difference between Tether or other stable coins or cryptocurrencies to Bitcoin, the uniqueness of Bitcoin, they will try to start acquiring Bitcoin in one or the other way. I'm absolutely convinced about that, but the majority of people needs a stable value and something where they can calculate with.
Yeah. Well, just one other concept that I often return to, Anita, is New Zealand, a former Prime Minister talked a lot about the two-tier society during the COVID years. And I do sometimes wonder whether something like that really applies to what we're seeing with Bitcoin, where for the vast majority of citizens of the world, maybe they're going to use some sort of digital CBDC, digital dollar. And then for the people who choose self-sovereignty, Bitcoin is the option that's available to them. But I do question this idea that maybe we never see mass adoption of Bitcoin, but it's just simply for those who decide to use it. And is this a reality that you're sort of thinking about? Maybe Bitcoin is really for those who choose it and not for everyone who doesn't want it, sort of thing?
Maybe. I don't know what the future will bring. But at the moment, we are also in a phase like, here people really need to spend their money. They can't just hold it like a lot of us in Western countries can, Like the Bitcoin scene itself is very dominated, at least what you can read on social media and stuff. It's very dominated by the mindset of I'm hodling until death, like I will never spend my Bitcoin. I don't want to end up like the pizza guy. Ha ha ha, he spent 10,000 Bitcoin on 2 pizzas. Well, he actually was a great guy because what he did not only was the first purchase in Bitcoin, so it set the value of Bitcoin in a way back then. And he also doesn't regret anything because he was working in the space and he moved on to earn and spend Bitcoin. So I feel he's very well off today. So yes, in a way, we don't know how it turns out, but if it's just a store of value and people can't afford self-custody or some form of self-custody, maybe not full self-custody, but at least in parts, in a way, it's uncensorable, at least in their own countries, And when, how shall I say, I think people will also learn when in Europe and in the US, when the system, as we see, it deteriorates, it decays, it might fall apart, the current system, then definitely I think that people will learn and see that Bitcoin is out of that, it's an alternative to it. It's your lifeboat in a way. And the fact that a lot of people don't have the same chances and don't have the same opportunities to start using Bitcoin now in this still early phase is sad, but it's a general problem that we have because also technology, like people here only for a couple of years, they now have smartphones. But internet connectivity, mobile data is so expensive that most of them can't afford. So they are left out again, This is a scheme. We can't solve that problem with Bitcoin. I don't know if there's any solution to it at all, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I'm getting at, obviously my lot is in with the Bitcoiners, and I want to see this thing succeed and emancipate people from the state and these challenges that you've described today. But I do wonder. I had a really interesting conversation with the people from a project called Bit Credit, which is trying to build circular economies and enabling credit notes and some of these instruments of business that a little bit more fundamental than maybe consumer payments. And I think this is a big thing in the Bitcoin world, is circular economies that are focused on consumer payments for, buying some stuff in a shop and having, a number of shops together. But actually, when you look at the supply chains of a country like Zimbabwe, what does it mean for energy, fuel, raw materials, and their supply chain to actually be priced in Bitcoin? That's quite a step further along than where I think the infrastructure is at. And so we had a really good conversation, and I think that opened my mind up to actually there is still some work to be done to build this kind of financial infrastructure of this whole new thing on Bitcoin, which we just don't have at the moment. And at the same time, that's actually really easy to do with the US dollar, because everyone wants, everyone will take US dollars. I'll take US dollars, if they're available. And I think that kind of promotes a future vision of the world that's actually dominated by the US dollar or its competitor. And still I see Bitcoin is sitting outside of that. And so it's just kind of an interesting dilemma. I don't have any answers for you, but it's very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely interesting. And still, it could be that in like 10 or 20 years, we don't know how it's going, but that the system, and I mean that the global, that countries start realizing and also using Bitcoin as a neutral form of transformation of value, or transfer of value between all the countries and all the people. Maybe we fall back, maybe more and more people learn about the advantages of something that cannot be changed by any party. It only can be changed in a consensus of everyone who's using it. And I mean, the world is using the internet, that one TCP IP blah 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 protocol. So maybe we fall all back and realize, okay, actually, as Andreas Antonopoulos said, Bitcoin is the internet of money, so just use it. No one, neither the Americans nor the Chinese can influence it.
I am curious though. I mean, again, Zimbabwe is like the poster child for hyperinflation. But when you've had conversations with people, real people in Zimbabwe, what is their reaction when you talk about some of the properties that we look at in terms of fixed supply, inflation resistance? Do their eyes light up, or do they sort of not really get it, even though they should be the ones who ought to understand it the most? Like, what's your lived experience been talking to people about it?
Now, if you tell them that, most of them, their eyes light up and they say, really? But then there is a lot of doubt. Can that really work? Because you need to learn so much about Bitcoin to really understand that really no one can influence it or try to, and where does an uncensorability come from? These are also alien concepts to people that they might not really believe you. They don't trust you that it's really true. And only when you use it, when you show them, look, here I have Bitcoin in that wallet. They belong to me. There is this website. I can now, via that website, which is bitrefill.com, I can send airtime into the phone of your friend in Malawi, and we are sitting in South Africa. And when you do that, and the friend in Malawi says, hey, I got airtime, I have it, they are just like blown away and say, how is this working? And then that's the way to really drive interest, to show them something that is practical for them, that is solving a real problem they have. And from there, most of them also don't want to learn more about Bitcoin. It's only always a few people who get it, who have their own, interests set up that way, or their experiences in life. It's also important. What have your experiences been so far that you can take in what Bitcoin can offer you, And so, I feel for the mass adoption, we're still too early. The tools are still not working in a reliable way, that you have fixed fees, that you know what you can expect. But we are on the way. I mean, people are building on Bitcoin like crazy. And I'm still very optimistic about that. And the great thing about it is, yes, it might be difficult for those who can't afford that now, or don't have the headspace or the education to use it. But at least it's open for anyone and permissionless. And that, I feel, is so important, that we keep the keep up the permissionlessness and the non-KYC usage of Bitcoin, because otherwise I feel we don't really need Bitcoin, you know. I mean, it's still great because you can still use it, and it will be there forever as an opt-out. And I feel that's what makes me so optimistic, that there is an exit. We have something now where we can put our hard-earned money and be a little bit optimistic and hopeful about the future. At least no one can take it away from us.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I think, as I said, there's kind of a higher level breakdown of what's going on here, where you do have the consumer payments, as you just described, but refill and helping people on the day-to-day. But the real nuts and bolts of an economy in terms of producing and exporting goods, that sort of thing, still some way to go. But I do think Lindy effect comes into play the longer this thing is around, the longer it holds a floor price, at least in the global market, and especially compared to local currencies. It's maybe going to continue to grow, and people will learn about it, hopefully. But I guess what this all comes back to is what I mentioned at the beginning, was the role of education, and it's a big focus of your work with Bitcoin for Fairness and your work educating people. So I wanted to just maybe reflect on that, Anita, your outlook for this year, talking more about your education work and kind of helping people understand what Bitcoin could do for them.
Yeah, so basically a big part of my year has already happened. Like, I've spent from December basically during to May now, end of April on the continent, and we did a lot of work there. And going forward, I'm focusing on Crack the Orange, which is a website, which is an online learning platform for anyone who wants to learn more about Bitcoin. It's for beginners and definitely also people who are a little bit advanced already, but I feel there are we're just building a new database, a Bitcoin knowledge library, basically, additionally to the course program. And the next thing is also we are having scholarships there, so that people, aspiring educators or developers that are new in the Bitcoin and Lightning space, but they want to contribute, they can also apply for a scholarship. So people from the Global South or from areas where they are being disadvantaged and could not afford an education like that otherwise, they can apply for a scholarship. And we had, I think now we are having 120 applications so far, and 43 people, if I remember correctly, have finished the whole course now. A lot of them are already driving their own initiatives on the ground, because that's the goal with Crack the Orange, to spread information wide and far and for free, so that people can start their own educational initiatives. And we are also having a monthly live call where all these people who are learning about Bitcoin can come together. They are from different countries like South Africa, Tanzania, Kenya, Zambia, and they can also interact with each other and exchange ideas, what has been working in their work on the ground and what hasn't, and things like that. And then my goal this year is also to update my book, put a new edition of my Learn, Earn Bitcoin book out there with all the learnings I had myself about the technology in the last couple of years. And also, it's a fast-moving technology, so I need to revisit the wallets I'm referring to and things like that, because everything changes so fast. And at the end of the year, I might be going to Brazil to SatsConf, and maybe we're thinking about spending some time in Mexico. We have someone there who is very connected with on the ground with communities. And then it's just too far in the future, to be honest. But I'll definitely keep on doing what we have been doing and refining it and make it even better.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. And if people want to follow along Crack the Orange, and is that a part of Bitcoin for Fairness? Was this is a separate entity? How have you structured that?
It's basically all a part of Bitcoin for Fairness. And we have two approaches there. The one is the free education for educators, and the other one is basically you can also sign up and pay for a course with me, and then ask me directly questions. And that's cracktheorange.com. But if people want to follow me, the best actually is to subscribe to the free newsletter, which you can find at anita.link/news. And most of the times, I mean, I'm on X still, but I'm actually posting more on Nostr. I feel Nostr is also a great technology with similar characteristics like Bitcoin. And I just feel that this is the way to go also in communication and publishing your thoughts and everything. And I'm very excited about the developments there too.
Yeah. Okay, that's awesome. I really appreciate that, Anita, and thank you so much for bearing with us as we deal with internet and electricity issues on this call. But it was great to talk to you in person. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. I enjoyed it very much. Thanks, Cody.